This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Hello, my beautiful friend. Welcome to A Time to Care, the Caregivers Podcast. I'm Isabel Melgarejo, your host. And today with me, I have Joel Arsenault. He's a financial advisor. And one of the reasons I really like him is because his way of perceiving life, he believes that everybody should have a financial advisor. And I find it really funny because when he's networking, he will claim the weirdest jobs just to bring a different perspective. So, because he is one of those people that would like to connect with you before asking for your business. So that is very unique about him, and that's why I wanted to talk with you. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you.
Just before we started recording, we were talking about I don't know how many different topics. So why don't you start by talking a little bit about you, why you're a financial advisor, how you like connecting with people, and why you're doing this in life.
I'm a financial advisor that hates math. So right, there you go. Already it's my why. Because I tell clients and folks, I'm the youngest of five. When I went into kindergarten, my oldest sister went to college. So he's like a 14 and a half year. Yeah. And from 1982, this is when I went to kindergarten. And then when I graduated, 1999, my parents, Tom and Mom, had a kid in college. And it was their goal to help as much as they could. Dad worked in the local paper mill for 46 years as a piper or pipe fitter. And my mom was essentially the high school admin and secretary, basically doing the school, but that was her
Mhm.
title. Blue collar, Milltown. Obviously there were people with, money and these sorts of things, which now is kind of funny. It's like, I remember when microwaves came out and my aunt and uncle, who we always thought were rich, they got a microwave and it's like, yeah, they're rich. We didn't get one for like a year after that. And the thing was like the size of it, like 6 feet wide and weight from the panels. But why I do what I do is, my parents never talked to anybody like me, like an advisor or to just discuss what they were thinking and what their options were, and more importantly, what those decisions would or could mean. Right. So I always tell people, my job really is to help people make informed decisions. I've got my lens of, expertise. Which part of that is having been in the industry now for 20 or so years, is pulling from other client stories and experiences and sort of applying that. But they never sat down with someone like me and say, hey, we want to help our kids. We want to pay as much as we can, for college, whatever it is they want to do at the place. And someone like me might have said, well, that's great. Have you considered how that might affect, you when you're older, when you're 65, 70, whatever? You might have to work longer. You might not be able to have the retirement that you're dreaming, to do this, do that, that sort of thing. Presenting all of those options. And so they might decide the same exact thing. But the difference would be that, that would be an informed decision. And I saw it, right? Because again, youngest of five, but my dad was 10 years older. He passed away in 2014, but he retired much sooner than my mom. One, because of the age, and two, because of the nature of what we were doing to pay the paper mill. When he passed away, more than half of his pension was gone. Now all of a sudden my mother's income dried up, right? The life insurance policies that they used to have was MetLife, where the guy would come once a year, sit down at the kitchen table, and quite frankly, he would like sell them stuff, and he had them cancel their policies and do something with it. There was very little life insurance, all these sorts of things. They had no wills, no estate plan, no powers of attorney, all this stuff that, I didn't know or think of, obviously, when I was young, but they never had anybody to suggest or point that out to them. What is the repercussion of doing nothing? And hey, thankfully, they helped pay for some of it. Certainly not all of it. I mean, that's right? But they did what they could, and that's honorable and admirable. But people don't need a dollar to have a meeting for someone like me, and just to ask questions, and perhaps it triggers something in them to say, "Huh, I didn't think of that." Right? I think
Yeah.
that's what we're doing.
And we were just saying that neither you or I or anybody our age or older, I don't know anybody who's not in school right now who had a personal finance class. That was something that if you were lucky enough, your parents would talk about. And it was not your parents, it would be your dad who would talk with you about those topics. Most probably you would hear those topics if you were a boy, not a girl, because how it was perceived, men would be responsible for the household and bringing the money in. People who heard anything related to investing, to saving money, all of these things were because they heard that at home. I'd probably the statistics because I don't, but I think very few people have a financial advisor. I think it's 20%. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't know that's the CDC, but I know it's pretty low. Certainly less than 20% would be accurate. And I think a lot of that has to do with kind of what you're talking about. The whole Rich Dad Poor Dad, that author Richard Saki or something like that, which I guess maybe he made up the whole rich and poor dad thing, but the concept is true, right? Like his parents, his family didn't talk about this. When he went to visit his friends who were rich, they talked about money and stuff all the time. And it doesn't mean that, again, you've got $1 million or 500,000 or 10 million, right? Like, I would argue people who have less resources need a better plan.
Yes.
It's counterintuitive, right? Like, oh, you've got a lot of money, you should hire. It's like, well, yeah, to do certain things. Well, what if, you've got your job, you've got your 401k, you've got Social Security, and it's like, the edge is very finite, right? Well, what do you need to decide, right? You need someone to, your option for healthcare or housing or, or living with it. So,
Yes. A lot of my clients, they have to figure out work situations because if they lose their jobs, like how is that going to impact in their future and their own savings? And that is something that I usually talk with my clients. Are you taking provisions that will support you supporting your loved ones? What's going to happen if you have to quit your job?
and I think I've talked to you about it before, but sometimes I'll draw for people kind of like a pyramid or a chart, right? It's like, this is now, here's the future. Pretty simple, straight line. If we go up, here's your ideal future, right? Like, here's what I really, really want to happen. And here's my hopes and dreams and objectives and all that stuff. You've got ideal future, and then you've got below future, you've got drift, and then you've got below that, you've got crisis. And so I think what happens to a lot of people is they're here and time goes on. And, health care, long-term care, those sorts of things. Something that now all of a sudden the future starts to occur and they start to drift away, right? And if people don't course correct, if they don't know, then crisis. And that's when people have to sell houses. That's when they have to do things they don't want to do. They put stuff on credit cards. They take a loan. They go to the title loan place for 35% loan on your paycheck at your partner, something like that. You know what I mean? So my job, right, to help make informed decisions, to help someone create a plan, and to shift you back from the drift, right? Course correct, so that you never get the crisis. You never have to pull in the reserve, parachute.
Yeah.
And people just don't see it that way. I'm not picking stuff here, but this is stuff we're talking about. What's the point?
I find it so interesting because if your car breaks down, you take it to the shop. If you're sick, you go to the doctor. There are two things in particular that we don't look for professionals. One is losing weight. We don't go to a nutritionist who knows a lot about food and what is the best plan for us. And the other thing is about money. We just start making decisions and we don't look for a professional that can support us. I think in this particular case is because we're so afraid of voicing our lack of knowledge. It isn't, for me at least, it is embarrassing that I'm 39 and there are still questions about finance that I don't know. And I think a lot of people go through life with this shame that I don't know and I should know these things.
I agree. And certain generations, they have, the silent generation, depressing era generation, which my mother is 83, so 4. She grew up in a house with obviously her parents, but also her grandparents. And we didn't talk about money. That was a private thing. You didn't need to know that. And that thread carries on through it. To your point with like diet and nutrition, I was talking to an accountant the other day, and it's funny, but this is very similar to like when we go to see the doctor. If my mother goes to the doctor, they could say, the earth is flat, space is waiting for you. She's gonna say, okay, well, the doctor said it. I believe it. If they're the smartest person on earth, right? Like, we listen to the doctor. Doctors don't get trained in like nutrition, right? They're like learning, medical stuff. They don't really study on and have advice on things. And if you think about most people's interactions at your doctor's office on a visit, it's getting better, but very few of us will ask questions, even though we know we should and go in. Kind of the same thing. It's like, I feel like an idiot. I don't want to ask them that. Or, or they're rushing through it, right? So, like our health, like our physical health, our mental health, our financial health, again, I think these things are becoming more prevalent and people are talking about them, but we still get ways to go. That's kind of my job mission. People need advice. They should understand who they're working with and how those people are getting paid and those sorts of things to make sure that advice that they're getting is good and not, just selling something. But yeah, it needs to be more and more. We're really starting in school. We don't need balance and practice, but thinking about these things. Do you want to work until you're 75? I don't think anybody does.
And I don't think it has to do with work. I know a lot of people who don't want to ever retire, but it is about financial freedom.
Mm. Well,
And
and I
you
say, and I say having working off. I try to phase out the word retire. When can work become optional? You can spend time doing more of what you're passionate about rather than what pays you. It could be as a businessman, but now you're overseeing the business rather than being it.
Yeah, or there are so many things you could do. My dad, at some point, he was looking into becoming a member of this organization of consultants, and all of them were men, mostly men in their 60s, 70s, with all this experience. They were retired. They still wanted to work, but they didn't want to work full time. So they had this organization of people who would give amazing advice because they had 40, 50 years under their belts of experience. So they would go to companies, give advice, and then just leave. So, and that is fantastic. But that is a choice that you make to do that work. And if you want to travel for 2 months, then you don't have to work and you go and travel and come back and do whatever you want to do.
Longevity becomes a problem that people are living longer, and obviously science and that medical stuff is really progressing further and doing some great stuff, happening crazy in a good way, right? For robotic art or mechanical part was just done last week or the week before or something, and find a decision and it's kind of mind boggling. So if we're all living to 100 with a good quality of life, wow, there's some more stress on their financial situation. But also, a lot of these sort of longevity experts, people who are older can now take roles of mental, start passing along, advice and mentorship, and will be valuable pieces to their, community, whereas all everything, but we get older, we retire, and like, oh, okay, go play shuffleboard.
What do you recommend people? Because I know, like, where do they start doing research? What you recommend?
I think it's kind of a database thing, right? Like, I've got I actually literally last week just had a new client to me who's a 18-year-old son of an older son. He just graduated high school. He actually started a landscaping business himself, and made some decent money for 16, 17, 18-year-old. Really wanted to start putting something away. And to your earlier point, this was due to the advice and support of his grandparents, who are very influential in their lives because they're single mom, and the mother. When and what, I think if it starts in literally elementary, middle, and high school, teaching about these concepts, people, it was almost some sort of forced way to start saving, $10 a month when you're 15 years old. Just doing that and literally closing their eyes and fast forward, 30 years, it put so many people that much further ahead. But it's not just about saving and investing. It's about things other pieces too of something like life insurance or long-term care insurance. The other aspect. It's about powers of attorney and state claims, beneficiaries, and all these sorts of things. Pieces into place, like we read about Maslow's hierarchy. For people to be productive, they have to feel safe and they have to be fed, and you kind of work your way up to where you can kind of go from like productive memory to society. I think it's the same way with sort of planning. You've got to start small, and I don't think there is a correct way. In fact, it's funny that I'm always asking clients about the state plan and making sure they have stuff in place. And the estate attorneys oftentimes right? So if you have a kid like this young gentleman going into the U.S. Army, something happens to him medically, and the mom calls the hospital. Guess what they're going to tell it? Nothing. He's 18. He's an adult. Right? So you have a power of attorney, health power of attorney. You have these things in place to make sure that your kid, you're 18-year-old, right? You can still get information about them. So oftentimes, one of the simple things I do is going to college, I'll remind them, hey, let's call the attorney. You're going to get the power of attorney. If they get hurt, if they get sick, if you want their grades, what you're paying for, probably, you're not going to give it to you. They're in the bucket. A lot of this doesn't have anything to do with I think that's my main message to prospective clients is investing is a part of it, saving is a part of it. I think helps. There's a lot of other things that are before and during. I say we start as young as we can and just start sprinkling the concept. To your point, getting out in the open. Mental health, good kind of similarity, right? Like when I grew up, being a tough man, you don't cry, you don't show emotion, right? All these sorts of things. That has seems to be continuing to soften, right? It's okay to show emotion now, more than it was, right? To talk about mental health. Hey, you know what? I'm having a hard time with it. It seems to be okay thing. And for whatever reason, I think you're right. Like talking about money out in the open is still not quite. I think that's the acceptable.
What do you recommend people to break those taboos or feel more comfortable talking about these topics?
I think you have to, some way, sometime, you have to connect emotionally to, right? You have to put them through the mental exercise of, visualizing or thinking through the what if. Recently saw a gentleman who was speaking at a conference. He was trying to get his team to come up with ideas on how to grow, right? Because they wanted to grow, not really his team. And then, nobody had. And so he got up and laid down and talked to them. And said, all
Mhm,
right, I'm dead. The idea until you start. Now we're in crisis. Right?
mhm,
Oh my God, what would we do next? And now the ideas start coming. You
mhm.
sit down with a parent or a child. No parent, most parents don't want to live with this thing that they haven't put into each other. And a lot of people say it, but you need to really pause and jump in. What does that look like? You're 75. You're living in your kid's basement. They're taking you an appointment for you're 62. You haven't saved a penny. You haven't done anything to plan. What does that feel like? What does that look like? I mean, it's got to be emotionally motivated. One day you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, wow, I'm pretty bad.
Yeah, it's impressive.
I bet you've heard a lot of stories, right? People like social media are pictures. I didn't realize I feel like when I look at it. Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, something emotional. It's like reality has to fit. I've had clients and I'm telling them part of my job is to nudge you and come up with tasks and you gotta do this and I gotta do that and those sorts of things. Estate planning is a good example because a lot of people don't do it. And it's like, yeah, we have to do that. So I set up reminders. I tell them, it's like, look, after a certain amount of time, like, I've asked you 6 times. I've set up an appointment, you set up an appointment and haven't done anything. Is it really important to you? Like, because if you die, it's going to be a complete mess. It's gonna be and I guess you're okay with it. Have you
Yeah.
given up on your planning? But I think it has to be an emotional tie. It's like anything. January 1st, you set the New Year's resolution. Oh yeah, I'm going to lose weight and get in shape this year. And it doesn't sink in until you see a picture of yourself and you look like this unhealthy beast, or you have a medical event. And it's like, oh my God, like, I could have died.
Well, thank you so much for coming today. Where can people find you? Where can they connect with you? and learn more about you and what you do.
My website's probably the best place to get, different information about plans for experience.com. For to, it's often this it's important, but it's plan first. You get it, the plan comes first. Period. You gotta have a plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it.